It's midday. The birds go quiet first, then the temperature drops, then the light turns wrong, grey, metallic, nothing like dusk. You look up and the sun is gone, replaced by a black disk with fire leaking around the edges. You have never seen this. No one you know has ever seen this. And you have about 4 minutes to decide what it means. No phone to check, no scientist to call, no app that warned you 3 weeks ago exactly when this would happen and for exactly how long. Just the sky doing something it has never done in your entire life, in your parents' entire lives, in anyone's living memory. So, what did people actually do in that moment? Not what we assume they did. What the evidence says they did. Let's start with the sound. In 2017, when a total solar eclipse crossed the United States, researchers stationed at zoos and nature reserves recorded animal behavior along the path. Chimpanzees started screaming and climbing to the highest points of their enclosures. Spiders began tearing down their own webs, something they normally only do at the actual end of the day. Crickets started chirping the way they chirp at night. Cows walked back toward the barn on their own. The animals weren't confused by an eclipse. They were reacting to a sky that had just broken the rules it had followed every single day of their existence. And humans are animals too. Before we had a word for eclipse, before we had a reason, our bodies would have reacted exactly the same way. A drop in light, a drop in temperature. Every instinct built over millions of years screaming that something has gone wrong with the sun. Now, here's the part that separates us from the chimps and the spiders. We didn't just react, we tried to explain it, and some of those explanations came with real consequences. In ancient China, court astronomers held one of the most important jobs in the empire, predicting the movements of the sky, including eclipses, because an unpredicted eclipse wasn't seen as a natural event. It was seen as the sky itself under attack. The most famous account, whether fully historical or partly legend, describes two royal astronomers named C and OO, whose entire responsibility was forecasting these events. When an eclipse caught the court off guard, the failure wasn't treated as a scheduling error. It was treated as a catastrophe someone should have prevented. That's not a story about superstition for its own sake. That's a civilization treating the sun's disappearance as an existential threat serious enough to end careers, and in some tellings, lives. The Chinese weren't the only ones keeping careful written records of the sky. Thousands of miles away in ancient Mesopotamia, Babylonian and Assyrian scholars produced some of the oldest surviving astronomical documents on Earth, clay tablets covered in cuneiform that tracked celestial events for centuries. Eclipses show up constantly in these records, but not as neutral data. They're recorded as omens, warnings tied directly to the fate of the king. One surviving tablet describes an eclipse as a sign that the king will die and the land will be ruined. Language repeated across multiple records, and here's the detail that shows just how seriously this was taken. When astronomers predicted an eclipse in advance, some Mesopotamian kings would temporarily step down from the throne. A substitute king, sometimes a prisoner or a low-status stand-in, would be placed on the throne for the duration of the danger, ready to absorb whatever fate the eclipse was about to deliver. Once the eclipse passed and the real king was safe, the substitute was quietly removed. Think about that. An entire government reorganized around the idea that the sky disappearing for a few minutes could kill the most powerful person in the empire, and the solution wasn't panic. It was bureaucracy, a workaround, which tells you something important. Even in fear, humans were already trying to outthink the threat. The Chinese and the Mesopotamians weren't alone in believing something was actively attacking the sun, and multiple independent cultures across the ancient world arrived at strikingly similar explanations without ever contacting each other. In China, the word for eclipse literally translates to eat, describing a dragon devouring the sun. Vikings believed two wolves, Skull and Hati, chased the sun and moon across the sky and occasionally caught one. In parts of West Africa, oral traditions described the sun and moon fighting, and the community's job during an eclipse was to intervene, to make noise and stop the fight before real damage was done. That detail matters because it tells us something bigger than fear. Across wildly different continents and completely disconnected timelines, human beings didn't just panic during an eclipse. They acted drums, banging pots, shouting at the sky. Not passive terror, an attempt to physically fight back against something ancestors couldn't touch or understand. Archaeologists have even found physical evidence tied to eclipse tracking, specifically evidence that predates writing entirely. At Loughcrew in Ireland, a megalithic monument roughly 5,000 years old contains markings that some researchers believe record a solar eclipse, carved by people with no writing system, no telescopes, and no mathematics as we define it, but with the patience to observe the sky across generations and pass that pattern down. That's the detail worth sitting with. Long before anyone could explain why an eclipse happens, and long before anyone could write an omen down on a clay tablet, people were already tracking when they happen, because predicting the sky, even without understanding it, meant a small measure of control over something that otherwise felt like it could end the world without warning. So picture the actual moment reconstructed from all of this. You're in a group, maybe 20 or 30 people, out in the open when the light starts changing. The first reaction isn't thought, it's instinct. A tightening in the chest before anyone says a word. Someone points. The birds have already gone silent. Whatever livestock or dogs are nearby start pacing, agitated, and that agitation spreads through the group faster than anyone could explain out loud. An elder, or whoever holds the group's accumulated knowledge, starts speaking fast, low, urgent, reaching for whatever explanation has been passed down for exactly this moment. Then the temperature drops, sometimes 10 degrees or more in a matter of minutes, and that physical sensation, cold air in the middle of the day, tells everybody in that group that something has gone fundamentally wrong with the world. This is the moment people start making noise. Not randomly, deliberately. Across cultures separated by oceans, the instinct is nearly identical. Bang something, shout, throw things toward the sky. Someone grabs two stones and strikes them together. Someone else screams at the black disk directly, as if volume alone could reach it. It isn't chaos, it's an attempt at intervention, the same impulse that makes you shout when someone you love is in danger and you can't reach them. And then totality. Full darkness in the middle of the day. Stars visible at noon. The temperature keeps falling. Somewhere in the group, a child is crying and an adult pulls them close without breaking rhythm on the noise they're making. And then, usually within a few minutes, the light returns. The sun comes back, the birds start again, the group is still standing. And whatever explanation someone offers in that moment for why it happened and why it stopped gets repeated, retold, and eventually carved into stone, written onto a clay tablet or spoken into legend for the next few thousand years. That's really what separates the eclipse response from every other survival crisis in ancient life. A predator attack ends in death or escape. A storm ends in shelter or exposure. But an eclipse always resolves the same way. The sky returns to normal every single time. And that pattern threat followed by guaranteed resolution is exactly the kind of event that gets turned into myth, because it's simple enough to explain with a story and consistent enough that the story always seems to work. Bang the drums, and the sun always comes back. Of course the drums worked. They worked every single time anyone tried them. Swap out a king for a substitute, and the real king always survives. Of course, the substitution worked. It was never really the sun that needed defeating in the first place. Today, you know exactly when the next eclipse is happening, down to the second, from an app on a device in your pocket. You'll put on a pair of cardboard glasses, maybe host a small gathering, and watch something ancient humans would have considered one of the most dangerous moments of their lives. And you'll do it as entertainment. The birds will still go quiet. The temperature will still drop. Your body will still register, on some level buried under tens of thousands of years of instinct, that something about the sky has gone wrong. The only difference is you already know the ending. Your ancestors didn't. They just picked up whatever was nearby, made as much noise as they could, and waited to find out if the sun was ever coming back.